we're going to show you how to turn on and off the grids, the axes, numbers, change settings for the view window in both the graphing sticky and also in the geometry sticky of Classpad.net. Basically in Classpad.net, we have separate stickies. So if I click here, we have all of these are a separate sticky. So you've got calculations, graphing, geometry, data. And each one has its own little set of settings. And so for example, this whole paper has its own settings. And so anytime you see 3 dots, so if you look over here to the right, that allows you to change the settings of whatever sticky or for example, this is the paper you're in. So if I click the 3 dots here, these are settings for the entire paper. So if I change the math settings, it's changed for the entire paper. What we're looking at is both the graph. So let's pull up a graph and the geometry. So we're going to pull up geometry. And the reason we're looking at these is these have the option to turn on and off grids, change the numbers, change your range, your window settings, those types of things. And I want to make sure you know how to do that. So you'll notice the graphing sticky starts with a grid and axes automatically. And so when I click it, it's highlighted, I'm in it. If you look here to the right, it's 3 dots. So when I click on the 3 dots, here are my settings for the graphing sticky. And it's very easy to turn on and off the axes, the numbers, the grid, and the label. The default is to have them on when you start to graph something, but if I click them, watch, you can see that it disappeared right away. So once you unclick something, if you click off the axes, the number automatically turns off. So let's click that back on. I can just turn off the numbers and you won't see the numbers anymore except for the origin. If you want to turn the grid off, you can do that and just have the axes. You could turn it all off. You can turn off X and Y labels if you don't want any of those on. So very easy to change the settings. You simply go to the 3 dots and click what you want on or off. And here notice also that you can change your input-output ranges, your scale. You can change whether, if you're doing inequalities, whether it's an intersection or a union. You can change how your coordinates come up, whether they're decimal or standard. So settings for the graph is up here to the right, three dots, and it's very, again, just click what you want on and what you want off. And same thing here if you want to do conics. So that's it for settings on the graph. The geometry is a little different. The settings are found in the exact same spot. So you'll notice, again, 3 dots up here to the top right. But you'll notice this has a much more entailed options because there's a lot more grids available in the geometry. So again, default is actually to not have a grid on, whereas the default in the graphing is a grid. So if I want to have a grid on, I hit this and all of a sudden I will have a grid, and then I can turn the axes on. So some of this looks just like it did with the graphing sticky. If I turn the axes on, then I have the option to turn the numbers on, and I can turn the labels on if I want X and Y. I can change my units of measure. So notice that in geometry you have different options because we're using measurement. I can also, because it's geometry and I'm moving dynamic objects around, I can snap my objects to the grids. If I have a grid, I can fix them so that they'll only go on perfect coordinate or perfect intersections. I can label the points automatically. I can make hidden objects be visible. I can change my decimal here. Notice also there's lots of different types of grids. Once I turn on a grid, well, let's just look at what I've done now. By clicking on the axes, labels, numbered, and grid, in geometry you have to hit OK because there's so many changes that are available. You hit OK to confirm that that's what you want. So when I hit OK, it looks kind of like the graph now. But notice it's not, each grid is not even more gridded. So let's go back to the settings. How could I make it look exactly like the graphing thing? This is where I can put in a minor grid. So if I put the minor grid on, now it looks exactly like the geometry. But here's the difference with, it looks exactly like graphing. Here's the difference with geometry. Let's actually turn off the axes and let's look at dots. So notice that I have the option in geometry, which I did not have in the graphing sticky, to have a dot matrix. And so, whoops, I did not hit OK. Very important to hit OK. Oh, and I need to turn the grid on. So I'm going to say OK. And now I have a dot matrix. So think about a geoboard. That's a really nice feature of. So let's go back and let's show you what the third grid, this is an isometric grid, which is fantastic for 3D objects. So when I hit OK here, I'm going to be able to do nice 3D objects. So settings for both of them allows you to turn the grids on and off, axes, numbers, labels, and then in geometry you have some more options based on the dynamic geometry capabilities, such as measuring angles and length and things like that.